horas tienes, no?
¿Yo?
¿Qué hora es?
Sleep.
Sientes hambre.
We are at the World's Fair Marina, I believe it's called. It's in Flushing, right next to LaGuardia Airport. Right there in the back. I'm sure you guys can see it. Can you see? Thought it'd be a nice place to shoot a video. We are now officially 3 months into 2025. 3 months into my sabbatical. So I figured it makes sense to shoot a video in a new spot. Looks like a nice backdrop. And talk about how things have been going with my sabbatical, what sort of progress has been made, and just, I guess, my general thoughts and feelings about a sabbatical. So what sort of progress have I made towards my sabbatical goals? I had 3 of them laid out. If I'm being honest, I don't know if I thought too deeply about it. I just sort of wanted to put things up on the board, so to speak, as having something to do while on sabbatical. One of them was to start a consulting business, which leverages my past experience working in big tech. So for those who don't know, I've been working for big tech companies like Facebook, Amazon, and TikTok, working in the advertising side of the business, doing technical things, helping advertisers set things up so that they can run advertising on these platforms. And I figured I could just do that for myself. And I definitely made some progress here. I bought a website domain, I started building out the website, and then progress sort of stopped towards that goal. I honestly got sidetracked by a few things. One was a case study that I just thought was really interesting for a potential job. I just thought that was a fun way to interview, as opposed to the typical, you talk to a few folks and then they decide they want to hire you. And I always like the challenge of case studies. Another one was a startup job with, like, I guess, sort of AI. And that would have been exciting too, just because, one, it's pivoting into a new space and industry that I hadn't worked in before. But beyond that, I think the idea that the startup could potentially take off, and if I were hired, I would have shares, I would be worth a good amount of money. I'm not gonna lie, that was also really enticing. So I think one aspect of this is that I was distracted. And I think when you are distracted and when you are considering things that feel familiar, for example, jobs that are in line with what you did before that you can just sort of step into right away. I think when you're considering retreading these familiar paths, then it's hard to give your energy mentally and emotionally to dive towards new things. I always said that the hardest aspect of taking a step or taking a leap of faith and to dive into something that is outside of the familiar of what you were doing, I always said that the hardest part of that is the mental aspect, is to wrap your head around it entirely and to just decide to go for it and to decide to dedicate all of your mental and emotional energy to that task, to sort of shut out the possibility of retreading on familiar ground. And if I'm being honest, during the first 3 months of my sabbatical, I haven't done a good job of that in terms of the goal of being a consultant. And I think the second aspect, if I'm being honest, is I was just afraid of failing. I was afraid that if I'd done everything I was supposed to, I'd set up my website, started marketing myself, doing outreach to potential companies and clients. I think a part of me was afraid that if I had done all of those things, that nothing would happen. Like, no one would want to talk to me, no one would hire me. And the possibility of that was one of the things holding me back. Which logically, it doesn't make any sense, because if you're afraid, if you try and nothing happens, well, at least you tried, right? You can say you went for it, that you did all the things that you thought would lead you to success and towards a goal. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Whereas if you sit on the sidelines and you're sort of waffling back and forth and you don't start and don't make any progress towards your goal, then nothing will ever happen, right? Then you're definitely going to fail. I think the second goal that I set out for myself was to write a book. And I did make some progress towards that. I had written out a lot of a book proposal. I've even written out and I've even done some research towards chapters. I've done some writing. I feel like the next step here is not necessarily to go full bore and try to write this book or try to find an agent necessarily, and instead to take some baby steps towards that goal. So one of the people I really admire, his name is Jesse, and he has published multiple books. And I sat down with him a few months back. Well, first I showed him my book proposal, and then when I sat down, I explained to him what I wanted to write a book about, and he gave me some really great feedback. He sort of explained to me that, wow, these birds are really loud. He sort of explained to me that my idea was solid, but I probably didn't have enough to write it because a lot of it was a sociological topic, and that I needed to incorporate more personal experience into it, which is great feedback because he is someone who's written books. And I feel like if he tells me like, hey, this is not good enough, then it's probably not good enough. But in addition to that, as opposed to me trying to figure it out myself, one of the pieces of advice he gave me was you should try to get a magazine article published first. So pitch yourself to magazines as a freelance writer, write a short article about the topic. He was explaining to me that publishing agents or book agents, literary agents, they sort of look to see if someone has written articles before or has gotten an article published about the book idea. It helps to lend the author some element of credibility, as opposed to if you're someone like me who's never written or published anything really, and if you're trying to just get a book published right away, it's much harder. And I think that makes perfect sense. After all, if you are good enough to write an article that gets published, that means one, you've done the work of consolidating your ideas and organizing them and being able to put together into a form that, say, an article that is compelling and interesting enough for a magazine to pick it up and publish. That's a really good first step to getting a book written and published. Also, if I'm being honest, this sounds a little egotistical, I guess. I'm not even sure if that's the right term. But I feel like if I start putting my ideas out there and I start pitching I feel like if I start putting myself out there and I start pitching a magazine article or certainly a book idea, that someone might come along and take my idea and write about it for themselves. So I think the next step for me as far as writing a book or writing a newspaper, I think the next step is just to make a YouTube video about it, share it with the world, talk about it. That way, at the very least, I can say, this was my idea. I came up with it. So even if I never get a book or a magazine article published about my idea, at least I have something I can point to and say, hey, this is what I came up with. And I put it out there to the entire world. So if I haven't done a great job at making progress towards being a consultant or writing a book, what is something that I feel like I've done a good job at? And for me, I feel like it's making YouTube videos. One of the big goals for my sabbatical was making content, putting it on YouTube, doing one video a week. And I'm pretty proud to say I've been able to do that. I feel like my videos have gotten better. I feel like they definitely look and sound better compared to my earlier videos. And I feel like my camera presence has improved as well, that I am better in front of the camera. I speak better in front of the camera, that my thoughts and ideas flow better in front of the camera. I'm pretty proud of that. I mean, it was something I said I wanted to do, and so far I've been able to do it. So it's been 3 months now, and how has the sabbatical gone? I would say my first piece of advice for anyone considering a sabbatical, well, let me just backtrack. I read something interesting recently that everyone's advice is just based on what works for them. So that's exactly what this is. This is advice based on what's worked for me. One of the earliest videos I made was talking about the need for a routine. And that's because I was sleeping in really late. It was also the heart of winter. And in the winter, there's just not many sunlight hours. So if you wake up a little later in the day, you feel this pressure or maybe anxiety to try to get out there and do things. When the sun sets at like 4 something, 5 o'clock, and the weather's also really cold, you can very easily feel like you've lost the day. I think that was definitely a big part of it. Another part of it was I felt guilty. It was the remnants of, I guess, working life, or maybe something deeper within me. There's a part of me that likes to work. And I think all of a sudden when you're placed in a situation where you don't have to work, that could be disconcerting. And you feel some level of guilt about that and some pressure to be productive. That's partly why I set so many goals for this sabbatical, I think. Because I didn't want to feel like I am wasting this time and not putting it to good use. And let me just say that is ridiculous. My first piece of advice to anyone who is on sabbatical now or considering one is set aside some time for you to just relax. You need some time to decompress. You need time to allow not just your mind to decompress from working, but also your body. And I felt so much guilt during the first couple of months for sleeping in late that I'll actually start a day tracker, a spreadsheet tracking the day, what time I woke up, what did I get done. And what I realized was my body just needed that time. It needed the time to sleep in, needed the time to relax. I talked about this a bit in my burnout video about how I think ultimately your body just keeps track of burnout and it accumulates mileage. And then for you to unwind that takes time. I don't think anyone can really go from grinding and being really productive for years at a time and then all of a sudden cut that part of their life out. Now you're asking them, okay, now we need you to, we don't need you to do anything. Now you're free to do whatever you want. It's like their bodies still retains maybe the memories or the accumulated damage. I think that was the case for me. So this is a very long-winded way of saying that I think you should give yourself a few months when you're first starting out in your sabbatical. Give yourself a few months for your mind and your body to unwind, for you to have some time to breathe and think about what it is that you want to get done. And I know that is not productive. I know that might sound like a waste of time, but I am telling you that's what essentially happened for me anyway. I really didn't make that much progress towards many of those aggressive goals, certainly not being a consultant or really writing a book. And eventually I stopped beating myself up for wanting to take it easy. I guess this is an interesting time to sidebar and talk about the idea of like, what are you working for? Like for me, I've worked so hard and saved up so much money specifically so I can get to this point in life. And this point in life meaning being on sabbatical, being able to do anything I want or nothing at all. Like I had to remind myself I had worked hard and saved up money just so I could be in this position. So if I've worked so hard to put myself in this position, then why should I feel bad about it? Like, why shouldn't I sleep in? I thought about it and I said to myself, if I'm not going to do it now, if I'm not going to relax now, I'm not going to sleep in now, I'm not going to take a long lunch whenever I feel like it. If I'm not going to do those things now, when I have the time, when I have the freedom, when I have the money, then when am I going to do it? If not now, then when? And if not now, then what was the point of me working hard and saving money? So those goals aside, how has my sabbatical gone? I think pretty good. I feel pretty good physically, emotionally, and mentally. I've Been able to keep a really consistent workout schedule. I work out every Wednesday. Get to take 3 hours, which is amazing. Just get to take your time, go to the gym when no one else is there, and that is fantastic. It's been really good for the process of unwinding that tiredness, that burnout that I had accumulated. Beyond that, I've done quite a lot of traveling. I traveled to the suburbs to visit a friend. I went to Toy Fair, which was my first time, and that was a ton of fun. I also went cabin camping. Again, a lot of fun. And there's going to be some more travel coming up. I think overall, I just feel good. I think once I allowed myself to get into a rhythm, so to speak, and allow my body to get the rest it needs, and sometimes it sleeps in a little later, sometimes it doesn't, and I don't beat myself up either way for it. Once I made that one change, or I released the expectation of how my days were supposed to go and how a sabbatical was supposed to go, I think once I released myself of that burden, I started to enjoy my sabbatical much more. And I'll be honest, a lot of it is just me sitting around at home playing video games. But if I look back at my tracker, it's also been very productive. There's been a lot of errands, there's been travel, there's been visiting friends and family, there's been making videos. It's not like I've just been sitting around and, eating chips on my couch every day. Like, I've actually done stuff. It's just that I wasn't super productive like I had initially set out to be. But I think that's okay. I'm on sabbatical. Now is the time for me to lounge and take things at my own speed. So what's next? What's coming up next in the next couple of months? I'm going to try to kick some things into a higher gear as far as the consulting business, as far as writing the book. I think now I am well rested and I have the energy to push things a little harder there. But also I'm going to be doing quite a bit more traveling. So in April, I am going to be flying, let's just say flying south. I'll definitely make videos about each of these destinations. So I'll be traveling for a lot of April. So yeah, that's how things have been going on my sabbatical in 2025. Not a whole lot of progress on things that should have been productive, although I have been really good at making these videos on time. So yeah, that's all I've got today. If you are someone who's watched every single one of my videos, thank you. I appreciate that. And if you made it this far in this video, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. And as always, take care of yourself. And if you can, someone else too.